Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore. The Yahoo News headline reads, Breastfeeding Dad Raises New Questions About Motherhood. I'm Matt Barber, Vice President of Liberty Counsel Action. Joining me in studio is Ron Miller, Associate Dean with Liberty University's Helms School of Government. And we are going to be talking about this today on Faith and Freedom. Boy, Ron, some days you just wake up and say, where am I and what has happened to this country that we live in? The radical LGBT movement, that's lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, has been pushing for decades to blur the lines between clear gender differences between male and female and create kind of a sexually androgynous America where there really is no male, there is no female. It's all just kind of a continuum of however you happen to feel at the moment. You're male or you're female, you're not. Well, the T in the LGBT stands for transgender or transsexual. And the story is that I'm addressing here is about a Winnipeg, Canada-based woman who calls herself Trevor McDonald. The report calls her a him. This is a 27-year-old transgender parent, a woman who had her breasts surgically removed and dresses up and pretends to be a male. She, through some modern innovations with science, is able, even though she has mutilated her body, has had a young child and is nursing that child. That in and of itself is bizarre enough. But what's very strange is that this woman now, who presents herself as a man, has asked to become a part of the leadership in the Leche League, which is a international breastfeeding support organization, and she wants to change their definition of motherhood to include dads in the raw definition of motherhood. Again, boggles the mind.
When I first saw this, I think the visceral reaction I had to it is probably similar to what most people would have. And the thing that really concerns me when I see things like this is not just the confusion that it brings about in the cultural debate, but the confusion it brings about in children. And when you look at everything about these agendas, they basically don't care about the children, even though they say they do. All of this is about self-validation. And this is a person who essentially wants to validate themselves, and they're using the child and the child's needs as a basis for doing that. And to me, that's reprehensible. And while the Leche League is taking a stand at present that says, well, you're going to be standing in front of a group of women who are going to be learning how to breastfeed, and we don't think you're going to make them feel very comfortable. Great observation on their part. They still say they're going to consider it, and I'm thinking to myself, even allowing consideration of something this foolish is not a good sign.
Well, the Leche League here is acquiescing to the tremendous pressure that the LGBT movement has put on them, and that is part of their tactics. That's part and parcel of the LGBT agenda, is that they yell and stomp and scream the loudest and demand that it's their way or the highway. We saw it in 1973 with homosexual activists storming on a conference of the American Psychological Association demanding that homosexuality be removed as a mental disorder from the DSM, the Diagnostics and Statistical Manual. They, through political pressure, even though a large majority of members of the APA did not want to do so due to political considerations, homosexuality was removed as a mental disorder. They've done the same thing to the APA on the transgender issue. Still, currently today, gender identity disorder is considered that a mental disorder. This is what this young woman, and we need to be careful here, not to mock this young woman, because it's very sad that she is so confused and that her gender reality, if you will, her God-given gender reality does not align with her gender identity or her misinterpretation of who she actually is and who God created her to be. She's a precious person. We need to pray for her that her confusion might be alleviated. This young boy, Jacob, her little 16-month-old son, as you point out, rightly so, is bound to be a very confused young man. This is very sad. But the political pressure is there nonetheless. And now we find out, not only is the Leche League considering allowing so-called men, transgendered men, and changing the definition of motherhood, but the APA is now considering removing, again, due to political pressure, gender identity disorder as a mental disorder. And again, this is a disorder that leads to people mutilating their bodies and going through cosmetic surgery in order to try to outwardly appear like the sex that they want to appear as. This is very sad, very unfortunate. So you have to get past the very bizarre, the very strange, and almost comical. I mean, the immediate reaction is to laugh at this, but it's much more serious than that. It just shows how out of touch with reality and the level to which the LGBT agenda and these organizations are in rebellion against God's design for human sexuality and our sexual makeup.
We've seen a lot of reports recently about parents who are accommodating children's supposed confusion about their sexuality and allowing them to explore and go in directions where their actual God-given gender won't take them. And when I read that, I think to myself, what would my parents have done if I had exhibited confusion? Well, they'd have cleared it up for me. Yeah. And I have a friend, a young lady who says that she wanted to be a boy at one point when she was little because the boys seemed to have a lot of fun and seemed to be able to do things that the girls couldn't do, like climb trees without having to worry about anybody seeing anything. And she said, her mother just said, okay, then I'll let you wear shorts. We'll deal with that right away. And parents had common sense when it came to raising their kids. Now, if a child says, I think I'm a boy, when you're a girl, parents say, oh, well, we need to do something about that. And I'm thinking to myself, where did you get your upbringing? Well, what's going on here? There's a lot of things like that happening, and this is just going to contribute to that. And it just is a further reflection of how man just seems to think they're smarter than God.
And that's exactly what it is. And it's political correctness. There's certainly a spiritual aspect here. It's political correctness. But as I've often said, political correctness presents a barrier to truth. And the parent that you use as an example, giving into political correctness, wanting to show how tolerant they are. So they take the confused little girl who, when I was a kid, the little girl that wanted to climb trees and play baseball and softball and wear flannel shirts and boys' clothing, we called him a tomboy. They grew out of it. I went back to my high school, reunion and saw kids that I had grown up with like that and see beautiful, feminine young women who were tomboys as little boys and have grown out of that. Imagine if these little girls had adults, the very parents that they look to, furthering that confusion, fostering and enabling that confusion so that those kids would end up leading a life where they could do harm to themselves.
And really, it just goes back to the whole notion in our society that adults are supposed to be the ones taking the lead and training and nurturing. And actually, it's an epidemic when you take the whole concept of the sexual revolution. We have so many children having children, and it's gotten to the point now where we don't really know how to raise our children, and we take our cues from entertainment, we take our cues from politicians, and we have people who have no business raising our children telling us how we should do it.
And that illustrates a great point, folks. There's a difference between dealing with and engaging people who suffer, for instance, from gender identity disorder and engaging the political lobby that seeks to force under penalty of law that indoctrination on your children through education and elsewhere. We need to pray for people like Miss McDonald who suffers from gender identity disorder, and we need to pray for those who are engaged in LGBT activism that they might, the Lord might lead them to the error of their ways and they might get back to defending God's design for human sexuality, God's design for a gender makeup. Go to lc.org to learn how you can become part of the Liberty Counsel team or give us a call at 1-800-671-1776. Liberty Counsel is here today defending the natural family.